Vincent Morrison stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office on the 42nd floor, surveying the city below like a general watching his conquered territory. At 38 years old, he had built Morrison Industries from a struggling startup into a billion-dollar empire spanning technology, real estate, and finance. His success came at a price that others paid. Employees whispered his name with the same tone people used for natural disasters. The glass walls of his office were intentional. Vincent wanted everyone to see him, to remember he was watching. His presence alone could silence an entire floor of bustling workers. Department heads checked their presentations 3 times before meetings with him. Junior executives rehearsed answers to questions he might ask until their voices went hoarse. Monday morning began like any other. Vincent arrived at exactly 7 o'clock, his tailored charcoal suit without a single wrinkle, his dark hair perfectly styled, his expression carved from stone. He passed through the lobby without acknowledging the security guard who had worked there for 5 years. The elevator ride to his floor was solitary as always. Nobody dared share the space with him. His assistant of 3 years had quit on Friday. The official reason listed was personal matters. The truth, which everyone knew but nobody spoke aloud, was that Victoria had finally crumbled under the constant pressure of impossible demands and zero tolerance for human error. She was the 7th assistant to leave in 4 years. The woman who refused to break, Natalie Foster, walked into Morrison Industries at 7:15 that same morning, carrying a simple leather briefcase and wearing a navy blue dress that was professional without being flashy. At 32, she had soft brown eyes that held depths most people never bothered to notice, auburn hair pulled into a practical bun, and an unhurried way of moving that suggested inner calm rather than laziness. Human Resources Director Patricia Chen met her at reception, relief evident on her tired face. Finding someone willing to work as Vincent Morrison's assistant had become nearly impossible. Natalie's resume was impressive, her references glowing, but more importantly, she had accepted the position without hesitation when others had declined after learning who they would be working for. Patricia led her through the gleaming halls, past open-plan offices where workers were already hunched over computers, past conference rooms with panoramic views, past the executive wing where vice presidents occupied offices that would have been corner suites anywhere else. Finally, they reached the throne room, as employees secretly called it. Vincent was on a phone call when they entered, his back to them as he gazed out at the city. He didn't turn around or acknowledge their presence. Patricia shifted uncomfortably, but Natalie simply took a seat in one of the chairs facing his desk and opened her briefcase, pulling out a tablet and beginning to review files. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Vincent finished his call and turned around, expecting to see the new assistant standing nervously, waiting for permission to sit, perhaps fidgeting or checking her phone. Instead, he found Natalie calmly working, completely absorbed in whatever was on her screen. He cleared his throat. She glanced up, met his eyes without flinching, and said, "Good morning, Mr. Morrison. I'm Natalie Foster, your new assistant. I've been reviewing your schedule for the week and noticed several conflicts that need to be addressed." Patricia held her breath. Nobody interrupted Vincent Morrison's silent intimidation tactics. Nobody met his gaze that directly. And nobody, absolutely nobody, jumped straight into work matters without first enduring his evaluating stare. Thou. First, Battle Vincent sat down slowly, his ice-blue eyes never leaving Natalie's face. He was used to reading people instantly, categorizing them, finding their weaknesses. But her expression revealed nothing beyond professional courtesy and focus. "I didn't ask you to review my schedule," he said, his voice low and cold. "No, you didn't," Natalie agreed. "But it's my job to manage your time efficiently. You have a board meeting at 9, a conference call with Tokyo at 9:30, and a presentation to potential investors at 10. Those times overlap." Vincent leaned back in his chair. The conference call was scheduled for 9:30 specifically. The Tokyo team adjusts to my schedule, not the other way around. I understand, Natalie replied evenly. However, the board meeting typically runs 90 minutes, according to the past 6 months of calendar data. That would put you in the middle of crucial investor discussions when Tokyo calls. I suggest we move the Tokyo call to 8 tomorrow morning, which is evening in their time zone and actually more convenient for their senior executives. Silence filled the office. Patricia looked like she might pass out. Vincent's jaw tightened. He wasn't accustomed to his assistants making suggestions, let alone logical ones that implied his scheduling had been inefficient. You've been here 15 minutes, and you're already telling me how to run my company? I'm telling you how to run your calendar, Natalie corrected gently. The company seems to be running quite well on its own. A flicker of something crossed Vincent's face. Surprise, perhaps, or the beginning of anger. Patricia couldn't tell which, and that uncertainty terrified her more than his usual predictable fury. Ms. Chen, you can leave, Vincent said without looking at Patricia. Ms. Foster and I need to establish some ground rules. Patricia fled, pulling the door closed behind her. Through the glass walls, the entire floor pretended to work while actually watching the confrontation unfolding in the corner office. The rules of engagement, Vincent stood and walked around his desk, a tactic that usually made people uncomfortable. He stopped a few feet from where Natalie sat, arms crossed, his full 6'3" height meant to loom over her. She tilted her head back to maintain eye contact, but didn't stand. Didn't shrink. Didn't show any sign that his proximity affected her. I don't tolerate incompetence, he began. Good. Neither do I. I expect perfection. You'll get excellence. Perfection doesn't exist. I don't repeat myself. Then I'll listen carefully the first time. Vincent felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Frustration, certainly, but also something else. Curiosity. This woman wasn't following the script. Everyone else cowered, apologized preemptively, tried desperately to please him. Natalie Foster sat in his office correcting his schedule and matching him word for word. Why did you take this position? He asked suddenly. You must have heard about my reputation. I did, Natalie acknowledged. 7 assistants in 4 years. A management style that HR describes as demanding and some employees describe less charitably. A tendency to fire people for mistakes that could have been learning opportunities. And yet you're here. I'm here because I don't make mistakes, Mr. Morrison. I'm here because demanding standards don't intimidate me. And I'm here because somebody needs to tell you when your schedule is inefficient. She paused. Also, the salary is excellent. For the first time in months, Vincent almost smiled. Almost. He returned to his desk and opened his laptop. Fine. Move the Tokyo call. Send my apologies and the new time. Then prepare briefing materials for the investor meeting. I want complete financial projections, market analysis, and competitor research on my desk by 8:30. You'll have them by 8:15, Natalie said, standing. Anything else? Yes. Coffee. Black. No sugar. I'm your executive assistant, not your barista, Natalie replied. There's an excellent coffee station on this floor. I'll show you where it is. Vincent's eyes widened. Excuse me? You heard me correctly, Mr. Morrison. I manage your schedule, coordinate your meetings, handle your correspondence, and serve as your strategic right hand. I don't fetch coffee. If you'd like coffee, I can call the building cafe and have them deliver it. Or you can walk 30 feet to make your own. The entire floor had stopped pretending to work. Through the glass, dozens of eyes watched this impossible scene. The new assistant had just refused a direct order from Vincent Morrison. People had been fired for less, much less. Vincent stood again, his face unreadable. He walked past Natalie to the door, opened it, and said loud enough for nearby workers to hear, "In that case, Ms. Foster, you can show me where this coffee station is." He left his office. Natalie followed, and as they walked through the silent, shocked workspace toward the break room, something shifted in the careful balance of power that Vincent Morrison had spent years establishing. Nobody knew it yet, but the empire of fear had just encountered its first real challenge. And the man who made executives cry had finally met someone who refused to shed a single tear. 3 weeks passed since Natalie Foster walked into Vincent Morrison's professional life and refused to follow the unwritten rules that governed his empire. The office atmosphere had shifted in subtle ways that most employees couldn't quite name, but everyone could feel. Vincent still demanded excellence, still reduced grown professionals to trembling versions of themselves during presentations, still ruled Morrison Industries with an iron fist. But something had changed. Natalie managed his chaos with quiet efficiency. She rearranged meetings he insisted couldn't be moved, then proved her reorganization saved him 4 hours weekly. She corrected his emails before sending them, softening harsh language without diluting his message. She declined requests on his behalf that he would have reluctantly accepted, protecting his time in ways he hadn't realized he needed. Most surprisingly, she disagreed with him, out loud, in front of others. During a strategy meeting with department heads, Vincent had proposed cutting the research and development budget by 30% to boost quarterly profits. Before anyone could voice their terrified agreement, Natalie had spoken up from her position near the door where she took notes. That would be a mistake? The conference room froze. Vincent's head turned slowly toward her, his expression dangerous. Would it, Ms. Foster? Please, enlighten us with your expertise in corporate finance. I don't need expertise in corporate finance, Natalie replied calmly. I need the ability to read. Your own 5-year strategic plan, which I was organizing yesterday, identifies innovation as your primary competitive advantage. The 3 patents currently in development represent potential revenue streams that could dwarf this quarter's profit gains. Cutting research and development now would be choosing short-term thinking over long-term dominance. Vincent stared at her for a long moment. The department heads held their breath. Then he turned back to the table. She's right. The proposal is withdrawn. Next item. That evening, after everyone else had left, Vincent sat in his office staring at Natalie's personnel file on his computer screen. It told him almost nothing meaningful. Previous employment at a marketing firm in Seattle, college degree in business administration, references that praised her work ethic and problem-solving skills. But the timeline had a gap. 2 years between her graduation and her first listed job. Another 8-month gap 3 years ago. He picked up his phone and called the private investigator he kept on retainer for background checks on potential business partners. I need you to look into someone, Natalie Foster. I want to know everything. The weight of the past Natalie locked her apartment door behind her and leaned against it, finally allowing her professional mask to slip. The small one-bedroom space was simply furnished but carefully arranged. Books lined one wall. A desk by the window held her laptop and stacks of files. Photographs covered the refrigerator, though she rarely looked at them anymore. She changed into comfortable clothes and made herself tea, then sat at her desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a folder she told herself she should throw away but never could. Newspaper clippings, legal documents, a wedding photo that hurt to see. 5 years ago, Natalie had owned her own consulting firm, small but growing, built on long hours and careful relationship building. She had been engaged to Thomas Grant, a charming investment banker who said all the right things about supporting her dreams. They were planning a wedding, building a life together. Then Thomas had asked her to invest her company's operating capital in what he called a sure thing, a real estate development that would triple their money in 6 months. She had hesitated, but love made people foolish. She had trusted him completely. The investment was a fraud. Thomas had known it was a fraud. He had used her company and a dozen other small businesses to fund a scheme that collapsed spectacularly, leaving investors ruined and him nowhere to be found. By the time the investigation concluded, Natalie had lost everything. Her business, her savings, her reputation, her faith in her own judgment. Thomas had disappeared with millions. The last she heard, he was somewhere in Southeast Asia, living well on other people's destroyed lives. Rebuilding had taken 3 years of working. 2 jobs, slowly paying off debts that weren't legally hers but felt like her responsibility. Another year of carefully constructing a new professional identity, getting references from people who had known her before the scandal, finding the courage to trust herself again. Then 6 months ago, she had seen Vincent Morrison's photograph in a business magazine. The article detailed his hostile takeover of a mid-sized investment firm, the firm where Thomas had worked before disappearing, the firm that had helped facilitate the fraud that destroyed her life. Morrison Industries now owned every file, every record, every piece of evidence from that company. Vincent Morrison had the resources to find Thomas Grant. Maybe he already knew where Thomas was. Maybe he had information that could bring the man who ruined her life to justice. So Natalie had applied for the assistant position. She had researched Vincent thoroughly, learning his patterns, understanding his needs, preparing herself to become indispensable. Not to get revenge exactly. She wasn't sure what she wanted anymore. Answers, perhaps. Closure. The ability to finally close that drawer and move forward. She closed the folder and returned it to its hiding place. Tomorrow she would continue being the perfect assistant, patient, professional, waiting for the right moment to ask the questions that had brought her here. Unexpected connections. Vincent received the investigator's preliminary report on a Tuesday morning. He read it twice, his expression growing darker with each page. Then he called Natalie into his office. She entered carrying her tablet, prepared for the day's agenda review. Instead, Vincent gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit down, Miss Foster, we need to talk." Something in his tone made her wary, but she sat, keeping her expression neutral. "You worked for Bennett Consulting 5 years ago," Vincent said without preamble. "A firm that went bankrupt after its owner was defrauded by her business partner. That owner was you." Natalie felt her carefully constructed walls crack. She had known this might happen eventually, but the reality of it still stole her breath. "Yes," she said simply. "Thomas Grant, investment banker, fraud, $5 million, in losses across multiple victims." Vincent leaned forward. "You were engaged to him. I was young and stupid. I've gotten older and smarter. Why didn't you disclose this in your application?" "Because it wasn't relevant to my ability to do this job," Natalie replied, meeting his gaze. "I've never been charged with any crime. I've never been sued successfully. I lost everything in that fraud, but I rebuilt. That experience made me better at what I do." Vincent studied her for a long moment. "The firm Grant worked for, Meridian Investments. I acquired them 18 months ago." "I know." His eyes narrowed. "You know, and yet you never mentioned it." "Why would I?" "You buy and sell companies the way most people buy groceries. Meridian was one acquisition among dozens. Is that why you're here?" Vincent asked, his voice sharp. "Did you think working for me would give you access to information about Grant?" Natalie felt something inside her shift. The truth was clawing its way out, tired of hiding. "Maybe at first," she admitted. "When I saw you'd acquired Meridian, I thought you might have records. Information about where Thomas went, what he did with the money. I thought maybe somehow I could find answers. And now? Now I realize how foolish that sounds. You have a billion-dollar empire to run. You don't care about one fraud case from 5 years ago. I took this job for the wrong reasons, but I've stayed because I'm good at it. Because for the first time in years, I feel useful again." Vincent stood and walked to his window, hands clasped behind his back. The morning sun cast long shadows across his office. When he spoke, his voice was different, quieter, almost gentle. Thomas Grant stole from 17 businesses, small companies mostly, family operations, consulting firms, one non-profit organization. He destroyed lives without hesitation. Vincent turned to face her. I remember the Meridian acquisition. I remember seeing his name in the files and feeling disgusted that someone so corrupt had operated so freely. He's good at hiding, Natalie said bitterly. The FBI gave up looking 2 years ago. The FBI has limited resources and competing priorities. Vincent returned to his desk and opened a drawer. He pulled out a thin folder and placed it in front of Natalie. Private investigators have neither limitation. She stared at the folder as if it might explode. What is this? Open it. With shaking hands, Natalie opened the folder. Inside were photographs, recent photographs. Thomas Grant sitting at a cafe in Bangkok. Thomas Grant entering a luxury apartment, building. Thomas Grant looking older but still recognizable, still free, still unpunished. How long have you known where he is? She whispered. 3 months. I track people who damage businesses in my sphere. Grant qualified. I've been building a case, working with international law enforcement. He'll be extradited within 6 weeks. Natalie looked up at Vincent, tears threatening to spill. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know you cared until 20 minutes ago. He paused. And because I wanted to be certain before I gave you hope. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Finally, Natalie closed the folder and pushed it back across the desk. Thank you for showing me this, but I don't want it. Vincent's eyebrows rose. You don't want justice? I want to stop letting Thomas Grant define my life. Natalie stood, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. For 5 years, everything I've done has been about recovering from what he took. Every job, every choice, every moment of doubt. Even coming here was about him. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of giving him that power. So what do you want? Natalie met Vincent's gaze, and for the first time since entering his office weeks ago, she let him see the real person behind the professional assistant. I want to do work that matters. I want to build something again. I want to stop hiding from the past and start creating a future. Vincent nodded slowly. Something in his chest loosened. A tightness he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. This woman who had lost everything and rebuilt herself, who had come to his company seeking answers but chose to walk away from revenge, possessed a strength he recognized because he lacked it himself. The technology division is developing a new project, he said abruptly. An app platform to help small businesses with financial planning and fraud detection. Ironic, given your history. They need someone to lead community outreach, to understand what these businesses actually need rather than what we think they need. Natalie blinked. Mr. Morrison, I'm your assistant. You're overqualified to fetch my dry cleaning and reorganize my calendar, Ms. Foster. You have an MBA and real-world experience that most of my executives lack. The position reports directly to me. The salary is double what you're making now, and you'd be helping ensure that what happened to you doesn't happen to others. Why would you do this? Vincent looked away, uncomfortable with the vulnerability required for honesty. Because 7 assistants quit before you came along. Because my management style is, as you noted, less than ideal. Because maybe I'm tired of ruling through fear and ready to try building something that matters too. He turned back to face her, and Natalie saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not the ice-cold calculation of a ruthless businessman, but the uncertain hope of someone who had forgotten how to trust, but was willing to try. Take the weekend to think about it, Vincent said. Monday morning, you can give me your answer. And Ms. Foster, whether you take the position or not, Thomas Grant will face justice. Not for you. For all of them. Natalie nodded, not trusting her voice. She left his office and returned to her desk, her mind spinning. Through the glass walls, she watched Vincent return to his computer, his shoulders slightly less rigid than usual. Neither of them realized that this conversation had shifted something fundamental. The empire of fear was developing cracks, and through those cracks, something unexpected was beginning to grow, something that looked almost like redemption. Natalie spent the weekend walking through the city, her mind caught between past and future. Saturday morning found her at a small coffee shop where she had once met with clients for her consulting firm. The place had changed ownership twice since then, but the corner table where she used to work remained the same. She opened her laptop and did what she always did when facing difficult decisions. She made lists, reasons to stay as Vincent's assistant, reasons to take the new position, reasons to walk away from Morrison Industries entirely and start fresh somewhere else. By Sunday evening, her lists were forgotten. The real question had nothing to do with job titles or salaries. The real question was whether she was brave enough to stop running from her past and start building towards something meaningful. Monday morning, Natalie arrived at the office at 6:45 earlier than usual. She found Vincent already at his desk, his expression unreadable as she entered. "I'll take the position," she said without preamble. "But I have conditions." Vincent gestured to the chair. "I'm listening." "First, I want full autonomy over the community outreach strategy. You can approve budgets and review results, but the day-to-day decisions are mine." "Agreed." "Second, I want to hire my own team. People who understand small businesses because they've been there, not MBA graduates who learned about entrepreneurship in classrooms. Reasonable." "Third, when Thomas Grant is extradited, I want nothing to do with the trial. No testimony, no press coverage, no reopening of wounds that have finally started to heal. Let the other victims have their justice. I'm choosing a different path." Vincent nodded slowly. "And fourth?" Natalie hesitated. This was the difficult one, the condition that revealed more than she wanted to share. "Fourth, I want you to consider working with a leadership coach. Someone who can help you manage your teams without creating an atmosphere of terror." The silence that followed was profound. Vincent's jaw tightened, and Natalie prepared herself for the explosion. Instead, he stood and walked to his window, his back to her. "You think I don't know how people see me?" he asked quietly. "You think I'm unaware that my employees celebrate when I travel, that they draw straws to determine who has to present to me, that 7 assistants quit because working for me was unbearable? Then why continue that way?" Vincent turned, and Natalie saw something raw in his expression. "Because 10 years ago I built a company on trust and partnership. I believed in people, gave them chances, valued collaboration over control, and my business partner, someone I considered a brother, embezzled $2 million and nearly destroyed everything I'd built. I saved the company, but I learned that trust is a weakness people exploit. So you decided to rule through fear instead. I decided to never be vulnerable again. If people fear me, they can't betray me. If I expect nothing but perfection, I won't be disappointed. If I keep everyone at a distance, nobody can destroy what I've built." He moved back to his desk, his voice hardening. "It's worked for 10 years, Ms. Foster. Morrison Industries thrives while other companies collapse." "Your company thrives," Natalie agreed. "But you're miserable, and you make everyone around you miserable. That's not success, Mr. Morrison. That's survival. There's a difference." The crisis that revealed everything before Vincent could respond. His office phone rang. He answered it, his expression darkening as he listened. "Send them up immediately," he said, then looked at Natalie. "The board's executive committee is here. Unscheduled. That's never good." 3 board members entered minutes later. Richard Holland, the chairman, led the group, his face grave. Behind him came Patricia Chen from Human Resources and James Wu, the company's legal counsel. "Vincent, we need to talk about the hostile work environment complaints," Richard began without pleasantries. "HR has received 17 formal complaints in the past month. Employees citing anxiety, stress-related health issues, fear of termination without cause. The board is concerned about potential lawsuits and company culture. Vincent's expression became stone. My management style produces results. Our quarterly earnings prove that. Your management style is creating liability, James interjected. We've already settled 3 complaints quietly this year. If this continues, we're looking at a class action lawsuit that could damage the company's reputation and finances significantly. What exactly are you suggesting? Richard exchanged glances with the others. The board is recommending a 60-day probationary period. You'll work with an organizational psychologist to address these concerns. If we don't see measurable improvement in employee satisfaction metrics, we'll need to discuss restructuring your role. The temperature in the room dropped. Vincent Morrison being put on probation by his own board was unthinkable. He had built this empire from nothing. He owned the largest share of company stock. He was Morrison Industries. You're threatening to remove me from my own company? His voice was dangerously quiet. We're asking you to change before we have no choice, Richard replied. Vincent, you're brilliant. Your strategic vision is unmatched. But leadership requires more than intelligence and ambition. It requires bringing people along with you, not crushing them beneath you. After the board members left, Vincent stood motionless at his window. Natalie remained in her chair, waiting. Finally, he spoke without turning around. I suppose you think they're right. I think they care about the company enough to risk your anger, Natalie said. That takes courage. And I think you care about the company enough to listen. That takes even more courage. I don't know how to be different, Vincent admitted, and the vulnerability in his voice made Natalie's heart ache. Fear and control are all I have. Without them, I'm just someone who trusted the wrong person and almost lost everything. Natalie stood and walked to stand beside him at the window. Below, the city moved through its Monday morning rhythm. Thousands of people. I got the letter about Thomas, she said, joining him at the railing. I know. My attorney sent me a copy. They're expecting a 15-year sentence. Good. The others deserve justice. She paused. Thank you for making that happen, even though I asked not to be involved. You taught me that justice and revenge are different things. The others needed justice. You needed freedom. Vincent turned to face her. Can I ask you something? Of course. That first day when you walked into my office and refused to be intimidated, what were you thinking? Natalie smiled. I was thinking that I'd already lost everything once. The worst thing you could do was fire me, and I'd survived much worse than unemployment. That gave me a strange kind of power. I had nothing left to fear. And now? You've built something remarkable here. The program is expanding nationally next quarter. You have everything to lose again. Now I know that having something to lose isn't weakness. It's what makes us human. It's what gives life meaning. She looked at the city lights spreading below them. Besides, I'm not alone this time. I have a team that believes in our work. I have colleagues who've become friends. I have a boss who's learning that strength and vulnerability can coexist. Vincent smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. Your boss is also learning that the person he hired to organize his calendar ended up reorganizing his entire life. Is that a complaint? It's gratitude. You saved me from becoming someone I would have hated. You showed me that the empire I built on fear was nothing compared to what we could build on trust and purpose. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe below them. Two people who had lost everything and rebuilt themselves, who had met as employer and assistant and become something far more meaningful. Not a romance, though perhaps that would come with time, but a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and the courage to change. The empire of fear had fallen. In its place stood something better, something human, something real. And for both Vincent Morrison and Natalie Foster, that transformation was worth more than any fortune, any title, any success measured in quarterly reports. They had learned the hardest lesson of all, that true strength comes not from controlling others, but from having the courage to trust, to change, and to build something that matters. The quiet waitress hadn't revealed a scandal. She had revealed something far more shocking and far more valuable. She had revealed that even the most arrogant, feared, and powerful person could learn to be human again. And sometimes, that was the greatest revolution of all. The end.